In the small town of Riverdale, where autumn leaves painted the streets in warm colors, lived a 14-year-old boy named Alex Chen. He wasn't particularly outstanding at anything, not in sports, not in math, and certainly not in music. Alex was the kind of student teachers often forgot about during roll call, the one who blended into the background of class photos. The local high school prided itself on its music program. Every year, talented students would showcase their skills at the Grand Spring Recital, which had become something of a tradition in town. Parents, relatives, and even folks with no connection to the school would attend, filling the auditorium to capacity. Alex hadn't planned on joining the orchestra. It was his mother's idea. "It will build character," she had said one evening, looking up from a school newsletter, "and colleges love to see music on applications." Alex had tried to argue, but his mother's mind was made up. The next day, he reluctantly signed up, hoping to play something simple like the triangle or tambourine. Instead, he was assigned to the piano section, despite having touched a piano only twice in his life. For the first few months, Alex managed to hide in plain sight. The previous music teacher, old Mr. Peterson, was nearing retirement and didn't pay much attention to the less enthusiastic students. Alex would pretend to practice, his fingers hovering just above the keys without making a sound, while the real pianists in the group carried the weight. But everything changed when Mr. Peterson announced his retirement mid-semester. "Students, I'd like you to welcome Ms. Rivera," the principal announced one Monday morning. "She comes to us from the State Conservatory and will be taking over the music department." Ms. Rivera was nothing like Mr. Peterson. Where he was forgetful and easygoing, she was sharp-eyed and precise. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and carried herself with the posture of someone who had spent thousands of hours perfecting her craft. During her first week, she assessed each student individually. Alex tried to call in sick that day, but his mother saw through the act and sent him to school with a packed lunch and zero sympathy. When his turn came, Alex sat at the piano, staring at the sheet music Ms. Rivera had placed before him. "This is a simple C major scale," she explained. "Please play it for me." Alex's hands hovered over the keys, his heart pounding. He pressed one key, then another, producing a sequence of disjointed notes that barely resembled a scale. Ms. Rivera's expression didn't change, but she wrote something in her notebook. "How long have you been playing, Alex?" Since the beginning of the school year," he mumbled, not meeting her eyes. "I see. And you practice how often?" The question hung in the air. Alex shifted uncomfortably. Well, we don't have a piano at home." Ms. Rivera nodded slowly. "The practice rooms are open until 5 every day," she said, her voice neither kind nor unkind, just matter-of-fact. Alex thought that would be the end of it. Surely Ms. Rivera would realize he had no talent and assign him to something less important, maybe turning pages for the real musicians. But 2 weeks later, Ms. Rivera made an announcement that sent a chill down Alex's spine. "The spring recital will feature solo performances from each section," she said, pacing in front of the orchestra. "I've selected challenging pieces that will showcase your abilities and push you to grow as musicians." The air in the room buzzed with excitement from the talented students and dread from the less confident ones. Alex tried to make himself smaller in his chair. "I'll be posting the piece assignments on the bulletin board after class," Ms. Rivera continued. "These are not suggestions. They are your assignments for the next 3 months." When the bell rang, students crowded around the bulletin board. Alex hung back, waiting for the crowd to thin before approaching. His finger trailed down the list until he found his name, Alex Chen, Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu. He blinked, certain he had read it wrong. He knew enough about music to recognize Chopin as one of those composers whose work was played by people who had devoted their lives to the piano, not by high school freshmen who couldn't even play a C major scale correctly. There must be some mistake, he whispered to himself. There's no mistake. "Mr. Chen!" Alex jumped. Ms. Rivera had appeared beside him, her arms folded across her chest. "But Ms. Rivera, I can't play this. I can barely play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," Alex protested, his voice cracking. "This piece is for real pianists." "Come with me," she said, turning on her heel and walking toward the practice rooms. Alex followed, his stomach twisting into knots. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step bringing him closer to what would surely be a humiliating conversation about his lack of musical ability. Ms. Rivera opened the door to practice room 3, which contained a grand piano that had been donated by a wealthy alumni family. She sat on the bench and motioned for Alex to sit beside her. "Listen," she said simply, and began to play. The music that filled the small room was unlike anything Alex had ever heard. Ms. Rivera's fingers flew across the keys, sometimes a blur of movement, other times slowing to coax out a delicate phrase. The piece seemed to tell a story, starting with urgency, then flowing into something dreamlike before building to a triumphant finish. When the last note faded, Ms. Rivera turned to Alex. "That's Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu. That's what I'm asking you to play." "But that's impossible," Alex blurted out. "You've been playing for forever, probably. I've been pretending to play for a few months." Ms. Rivera's expression softened slightly. "During your assessment, you couldn't play the scale correctly, but I noticed something else. When I played it first to demonstrate, you were tapping your finger against your leg in perfect rhythm, and your eyes followed my hands like you were mapping their movement." Alex hadn't realized he'd done that. "Some people," Ms. Rivera continued, "have a natural ear and instinct for music that can't be taught. Technical skills can be learned, but musical intuition is either there or it isn't. I think it's there in you, buried under a lack of confidence and training. But why give me something so difficult? Wouldn't it make more sense to start with something simple?" Ms. Rivera handed him a folder containing the sheet music. "Sometimes people rise to the level of expectation set for them. I'm setting the bar high, Mr. Chen." As Alex took the folder, another teacher appeared in the doorway. It was Mr. Lee, his math teacher, a quiet man with glasses who rarely spoke unless it was about equations or formulas. "Ah, Mr. Lee," Ms. Rivera said. "We were just discussing Alex's assignment for the spring recital." Mr. Lee adjusted his glasses. "I couldn't help overhearing. Alex, did you know you drum complex rhythms on your desk during math tests? Always in perfect time, too. Quite distracting for the other students, but mathematically precise." Alex felt his face grow hot. "I do," Mr. Lee nodded. "There's a mathematical structure to music that few people naturally grasp. You might understand it better than you think." The two teachers exchanged a look that Alex couldn't quite interpret. It was as if they were seeing something in him that he couldn't see in himself. "Here's what we propose," Ms. Rivera said. "You'll spend 1 hour after school each day working on this piece. I'll provide guidance, and Mr. Lee has offered to help you understand the mathematical patterns in Chopin's work." "And if I fail?" Alex asked, his voice small. "You won't fail if you put in the work," Ms. Rivera said firmly. "But even if the performance isn't perfect, your music grade will reflect your effort, not just the final result." As Alex left school that day, the weight of the sheet music in his backpack felt like a boulder. How was he supposed to play something professional pianists spent years mastering? His parents would laugh when he told them. His classmates would mock him when they found out. Yet somewhere beneath the doubt and fear, a tiny spark of something new flickered to life. For the first time, someone had looked at ordinary, average Alex Chen and seen something extraordinary. Two teachers believed he could do the impossible. Walking home under trees shedding their autumn leaves, Alex found himself humming the opening notes of the Fantaisie Impromptu, his fingers twitching at his sides as if already searching for the keys. Alex stood in front of his parents at the kitchen table, the folder containing Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu clutched in his sweaty hands. His mother was stirring a pot of soup while his father sorted through bills. Neither seemed to notice the storm of emotions brewing inside their son. "Ms. Rivera assigned me a solo for the spring recital," Alex finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. His mother looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "A solo, that's wonderful, honey. I knew joining orchestra was a good idea." "What will you be playing?" his father asked, setting aside an envelope. Alex opened the folder and placed the sheet music on the table. "This." His parents leaned forward, examining the densely notated pages. His father whistled low. "Isn't this advanced?" his mother asked, flipping through the sheets. "It's impossible," Alex corrected her. "Professional pianists spend years mastering this piece." "I can barely find middle C?" His father frowned. "Did your teacher explain why she chose this for you? It seems a bit much for someone just starting out." Alex repeated what Ms. Rivera had said about his natural ear for music and Mr. Lee's observation about his mathematical rhythms. As he spoke, he realized how strange it all sounded. Two teachers who hardly knew him had somehow spotted a talent he'd never noticed in himself. "Well," his mother said, returning to her soup, "Ms. Rivera is the expert. If she thinks you can do it, then you probably can. We don't even have a piano, Alex pointed out. His parents exchanged a look. Your Aunt May has that old upright gathering dust in her garage, his father suggested. I bet she'd let us borrow it if we help move it. By the weekend, a slightly out-of-tune upright piano occupied the corner of their living room. It smelled of mothballs and had a few yellowed keys, but it worked. Alex's first attempts were as painful to hear as they were to play. His fingers felt clumsy and disobedient, refusing to move as quickly or precisely as the music demanded. The following Monday, Alex arrived at the practice room with sore fingers and wounded pride. How was your weekend practice? Ms. Rivera asked, setting a metronome on top of the piano. Terrible, Alex admitted. I tried for hours, but it sounds nothing like when you played it. Ms. Rivera nodded as if this was exactly what she'd expected. Rome wasn't built in a day, Mr. Chen. Let's break this down into smaller pieces. For the next hour, she had him work on just the first 4 measures, showing him how to position his hands and teaching him about the pedals. By the end of the session, those 4 measures sounded almost recognizable, though still far from what they should be. Practice just this section tonight, she instructed. Don't move forward until you can play it without looking at your hands. The next day, Mr. Lee joined them. While Ms. Rivera focused on technique, Mr. Lee approached the music from a different angle. Music follows patterns, he explained, drawing circles and lines on a copy of the sheet music. Look here. See how this phrase repeats but with a slight variation? It's like a mathematical sequence. Alex found himself surprised by how much this helped. When he thought of the music as patterns rather than a jumble of notes, it began to make more sense. Weeks passed and slowly, painfully slowly, Alex made progress. 1 measure became 4, 4 became 16. He practiced during lunch breaks after school and late into the evening at home. His parents grew used to falling asleep to the sound of the same musical phrases being played over and over. But despite his efforts, Alex hit a wall. No matter how much he practiced, his fingers couldn't move fast enough for the middle section. Frustration built inside him like pressure in a sealed container. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult practice session, Alex slammed the piano lid down. I can't do this, he announced to Ms. Rivera. We've been at it for a month, and I still can't get through the whole piece without messing up. Ms. Rivera considered him for a moment. You're approaching this like it's just a technical exercise, Alex. But music is more than hitting the right keys at the right time. What else is there? He asked, genuinely confused. Instead of answering, she took out her phone. I'm going to record myself playing the piece in sections. Listen to these recordings whenever you can, while walking to school, doing chores, before bed. Don't just listen with your ears. Feel the music. Alex thought this sounded like New Age nonsense, but he was desperate enough to try anything. That night, with earbuds in, he listened to Ms. Rivera's recording of the first section. Then again, and again. By the 5th listen, he noticed something he hadn't before. How the melody seemed to dance above the accompanying notes. How certain phrases felt like questions and others like answers. He closed his eyes and imagined the keys beneath his fingers, his hands moving in time with the music. The next day, something strange happened. When Alex sat at the piano, his fingers seemed to know where to go, as if they had memorized the path overnight. He still made mistakes, but there was a flow to his playing that hadn't been there before. You're beginning to feel it, Ms. Rivera observed, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Word spread throughout the school about the impossible challenge Ms. Rivera had given to Alex. Some students were supportive, but others were openly skeptical. Chen can't even clap on beat, he overheard Zach, the first-chair violinist, saying in the cafeteria. Rivera must be setting him up to fail. The comment stung because part of Alex feared it was true. Why would Ms. Rivera choose him for such a difficult piece unless she wanted to make an example of him? That afternoon, Alex confronted her. Is this some kind of object lesson? Pick the worst student, give him an impossible task, then use his failure to motivate the others? Ms. Rivera looked genuinely shocked. Is that what you think of me? I don't know what to think, Alex admitted. This whole thing feels like a setup. Ms. Rivera was quiet for a moment, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the piano. When I was about your age, I had a teacher who did something similar, she finally said. He assigned me a piece far beyond my technical abilities, Bach's Goldberg variations. I thought he was crazy or cruel, but he saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Did you play it? Alex asked. Not perfectly, she admitted. But I played it. And in the process, I discovered that I had abilities I never knew existed. That's not cruelty, Alex, that's teaching. As Alex left school that day, he ran into Mr. Lee in the parking lot. I heard you talking with Ms. Rivera, the math teacher said, falling into step beside him. For what it's worth, I was against this plan initially. You were? This surprised Alex. I thought it was too much pressure, but then I remembered something from my research days. There's a concept called productive struggle. When students face challenges just beyond their current abilities and receive the right support, they often make extraordinary progress. Mr. Lee stopped walking and turned to face Alex. You're in the middle of that struggle right now. It's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. But on the other side of this discomfort is growth unlike anything you've experienced before. That evening, Alex sat at Aunt May's old piano with new determination. Instead of forcing his way through the piece measure by measure, he closed his eyes and listened to Ms. Rivera's recording one more time, letting the music wash over him. Then he placed his hands on the keys and began to play. He didn't look at the sheet music. He didn't count beats or worry about finger positions. He simply let the music that had been filling his ears for weeks flow through his hands. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but for the first time, it sounded like music rather than just notes. When he finished, he opened his eyes to find his parents standing in the doorway, watching him with expressions of astonishment. That was beautiful, Alex, his mother said softly. It was different, his father added. Not just technically. It felt like you were telling a story. Alex looked down at his hands, surprised by what they had just done. Something had changed, not in his technique, which still needed immense improvement, but in his relationship with the music. For the first time, he could feel what Ms. Rivera had been trying to tell him all along. Music wasn't just about playing the right notes, but about expressing something that couldn't be put into words. As he went to bed that night, Alex realized that while he was still far from ready for the recital, a small, fragile belief had taken root inside him. Maybe, just maybe, his teachers had been right all along. 2 months before the spring recital, Alex realized that traditional practice methods weren't enough. Despite his breakthrough moment and his growing connection to the music, his fingers still couldn't keep up with what his mind wanted them to do. The fast passages in Chopin's piece demanded a technical skill he simply hadn't developed yet. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Alex stayed late after his session with Ms. Rivera. While the other students had gone home, he wandered the empty school hallways, the melody of the Fantasy Impromptu playing endlessly in his head. His feet carried him to the school's east stairwell, a seldom used corner of the building with high ceilings and concrete walls. Alex hummed a few bars of the piece, and was surprised by how the sound echoed in the space. On a whim, he sat on the bottom step, closed his eyes, and pretended to play on his knees as if they were piano keys. What are you doing? Alex's eyes shot open. The school janitor, Mr. Vega, stood at the top of the stairs, mop in hand. Sorry, Alex mumbled, embarrassed to be caught in such a childish act. I was just practicing. Mr. Vega descended the stairs, his keys jingling with each step. Without a piano? Alex shrugged. Sounds weird, I know, but I'm trying to learn this really hard piece and my fingers can't keep up. Instead of laughing, Mr. Vega nodded thoughtfully. My grandmother was a pianist in Cuba. She used to say that before you can play with your hands, you must play with your heart and head. He tapped his chest and temple. What piece are you learning? Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu. Mr. Vega's eyebrows shot up. That's ambitious for a young student. It wasn't my choice, Alex said, and briefly explained his situation. The janitor listened carefully, then said, You know, this stairwell has the best acoustics in the building. The orchestra director used to bring students here to practice before they installed those fancy practice rooms. Something about the way sound bounces off these walls. Really? Alex looked around with new interest. I'm here until 6 every day, Mr. Vega said, resuming his climb up the stairs. Feel free to use this space if it helps. Sometimes a change of scenery is good for the brain. From that day on, Alex added the east stairwell to his practice routine. After sessions with Ms. Rivera on the real piano, he would spend 30 minutes in the stairwell, sometimes playing on his knees, sometimes against the wall, focusing on hearing the music and feeling the rhythms without worrying about hitting the right keys. At home, Alex's bedroom walls gradually transformed. What had started as a few notes scribbled on sticky notes became an elaborate system. He used colored markers to create diagrams that mapped the emotional journey of the music. Red for the passionate sections, blue for the dreamy middle part, yellow for the triumphant ending. Unlike traditional sheet music with its neat rows of notes, Alex's wall looked more like an artist's abstract painting. His mother was baffled when she came in to drop off his laundry. "What in the world is all this?" she asked, staring at the colorful chaos. "It's the Fantasie Impromptu," Alex explained, "but in a way that makes sense to me." She studied the wall, tilting her head. "I don't understand it, but if it works for you..." It did work. Somehow, translating the music into colors and shapes helped Alex grasp the structure in a way that traditional notation couldn't. When he sat at the piano now, he didn't see just black dots on 5 lines. He saw his colorful wall, the emotions of each section guiding his fingers. One afternoon, Mr. Lee caught a glimpse of photos of the wall that Alex had taken on his phone. "This is fascinating," the math teacher said, zooming in on the images. "You've created a visual algorithm of the piece. See how you've instinctively grouped similar patterns in the same color? That's exactly how mathematical sequences work." Mr. Lee began meeting with Alex once a week to help him understand the mathematical structures underlying Chopin's composition. They would sit in the math classroom after school, Alex's color diagrams spread out on one desk and sheet music on another. "Music and mathematics are cousins," Mr. Lee explained. "Both are about patterns, relationships, and transformations. Look here. This sequence of notes follows a clear mathematical progression. If you understand the pattern, you don't have to memorize each individual note." This approach was revolutionary for Alex. Instead of trying to memorize the entire piece note by note, an overwhelming task, he could break it down into mathematical patterns and emotional sections. Suddenly, the impossible became merely very difficult, but technical challenges remained. No matter how well Alex understood the piece intellectually or felt it emotionally, his fingers still stumbled over the rapid passages. His hands were simply unused to such complex movements. Ms. Rivera noticed his frustration during one practice session. "Your understanding of the piece has improved tremendously," she acknowledged, "but your hands need time to develop the muscle memory. Unfortunately, time is the one thing we don't have much of." She thought for a moment, then said, "There's someone who might be able to help. Are you free on Saturday morning?" That weekend, Alex's father drove him to Willow Creek Nursing Home on the edge of town. Confused, Alex followed Ms. Rivera through automatic doors into a bright lobby decorated with residents' artwork. "We're here to see Mrs. Novak," Ms. Rivera told the receptionist. They were directed to a sunroom where a white-haired woman sat in a wheelchair by the window, her gnarled hands resting on a small lap desk. Though her body seemed frail, her blue eyes were sharp and alert. Mrs. Novak was a concert pianist in her youth, Ms. Rivera explained as they approached, and later, one of the most respected piano teachers in the state. "She taught me when I was in college." After introductions, Ms. Rivera explained Alex's situation. Mrs. Novak listened intently, occasionally asking questions about Alex's practice routine and his approach to the piece. "Play for me," she finally said, gesturing to a small digital keyboard set up in the corner of the sunroom. "Not the whole piece, just the parts you find most challenging." Nervously, Alex sat at the keyboard and began to play the rapid arpeggios that gave him so much trouble. His fingers fumbled and hit wrong notes, and he stopped, face burning with embarrassment. No, continue," Mrs. Novak insisted. "I need to see how you move, not just hear what you play." Alex forced himself to continue, acutely aware of his many mistakes. When he finished, he expected criticism. Instead, Mrs. Novak wheeled herself closer and held out her hands. "May I?" she asked, confused. Alex offered his hands. Mrs. Novak took them in hers, turning them over and examining his fingers with the expertise of someone who had spent a lifetime understanding how hands work. "Your hands are tense," she observed, "and you're approaching the keyboard as if it might bite you." She demonstrated with her own hands despite their arthritis. "The piano is not your enemy. It is your partner in this dance." For the next hour, Mrs. Novak didn't focus on the notes at all. Instead, she taught Alex exercises for relaxing his hands and wrists, techniques for approaching difficult passages, and ways to position his fingers to maximize efficiency of movement. The secret, she told him, is not in practicing until your fingers bleed, but in practicing intelligently. 10 minutes of thoughtful practice is worth more than an hour of mindless repetition. As they were leaving, Mrs. Novak called Alex back. "Young man, I've taught hundreds of pianists in my lifetime. Some had natural talent but no discipline. Others had discipline but no natural feeling for the music. The rare ones had both, but the rarest of all are those who find their own path to the music, like you with your colorful walls and mathematical patterns. Those are the ones who truly make the music their own." On the drive home, Alex was quiet, processing everything he had learned. "Do you think you'll be ready?" his father asked, glancing at him. "I don't know," Alex answered honestly, "but I'm going to keep trying." That night, Alex added a new element to his practice routine. Before touching the piano, he did Mrs. Novak's hand exercises. Then he closed his eyes and visualized his color wall. Finally, he played, not mechanically following the sheet music, but letting his understanding of the patterns and emotions guide his fingers. The piece was still far from perfect. But for brief moments, sometimes just a few measures at a time, everything would align. In those moments, Alex wasn't thinking about notes or patterns or hand positions. He was simply making music, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. With just 3 weeks left before the spring recital, the school was buzzing with rehearsals. In the music wing, violinists tuned their instruments, flutists practiced tricky passages, and vocalists warmed up their voices. The excitement was palpable, except for Alex, who felt a growing knot of dread in his stomach every time someone mentioned the upcoming performance. Despite his unconventional practice methods and the guidance from Ms. Rivera, Mr. Lee, and Mrs. Novak, the complete Fantasie Impromptu remained just beyond his reach. He could play most sections separately, but putting everything together resulted in a patchwork of good moments interrupted by fumbles and hesitations. One afternoon, Alex overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. "Did you hear Rivera assigned Chen to play Chopin?" Zach was saying to a group of orchestra students gathered in the hallway. "Like the full Fantasie Impromptu." "No way," said Lily, a cellist with perfect pitch and 12 years of private lessons. "He can barely play Mary Had a Little Lamb. I heard him practicing yesterday," another student chimed in. "It was rough." "Rivera must have lost her mind," Zach continued. "Or maybe it's some weird experiment. See how badly someone can crash and burn on stage." The group laughed, and Alex quickly ducked into a bathroom to avoid being seen. He leaned against the sink, his heart pounding. What if they were right? What if this whole thing was just setting him up for the most humiliating moment of his life? That evening, Alex couldn't bring himself to practice. He sat at Aunt May's piano, staring at the keys without touching them. His mother noticed his unusual silence during dinner. "Are you feeling all right, sweetie?" she asked, placing a hand on his forehead. "You've hardly touched your food." "I'm fine," Alex mumbled. "Just not hungry." Later, his father knocked on his bedroom door and found Alex lying on his bed, staring at the colorful diagrams covering his walls. "Want to talk about it?" his father asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Alex sat up and hugged his knees to his chest. "Dad, what if I can't do this? What if I get up on that stage and completely freeze? Everyone will laugh at me." His father was quiet for a moment. "You know, when I asked your mother to marry me, I was so nervous I dropped the ring and it rolled under a restaurant table. I had to crawl around looking for it while everyone watched." "That's not the same thing," Alex protested. "No, it's not," his father agreed. "But the point is, I was terrified of embarrassing myself. And I did embarrass myself, but I still got the important thing done." "Your mother still said yes. So you're saying even if I mess up, it'll be okay?" His father smiled. "I'm saying that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the thing even though you're afraid." The next day, Alex forced himself to return to his practice routine, but the comments from his classmates had taken root in his mind. Every mistake now felt like confirmation that he was heading for disaster. During their usual after-school session, Ms. Rivera noticed his distraction. "Your mind isn't on the music today. Mr. Chen," she observed, stopping him mid-phrase. "What's going on?" Alex hesitated, then asked the question that had been haunting him. "Ms. Rivera, why did you really give me this piece? Was it to, I don't know, teach the other students some kind of lesson?" Ms. Rivera's eyes widened. "What do you mean? I heard some kids talking. They think you assigned me Chopin to show what happens when someone aims too high, like I'm supposed to be the cautionary tale." Ms. Rivera's expression hardened. Is that what you believe? I don't know what to believe anymore, Alex admitted. Everyone thinks I'm going to fail spectacularly, and maybe they're right. I still can't play the whole piece without messing up, and the recital is in 3 weeks. Ms. Rivera was quiet for so long that Alex thought she might not answer. Finally, she said, "Come with me." She led him out of the practice room and down the hall to her office, a small space filled with books, sheet music, and framed concert programs. From her desk drawer, she pulled out a CD in a clear plastic case. "This is a recording of my first public recital," she said, handing it to him. "I was about your age." Alex turned the case over. The handwritten label read Mozart Piano Concerto No. 23 State Youth Competition. "I practiced that piece for 6 months," Ms. Rivera continued. "My teacher at the time, a brilliant but extremely demanding woman, chose it specifically for me even though everyone said it was beyond my abilities." "Did you win?" Alex asked. Ms. Rivera smiled slightly. "Listen to it tonight and we'll talk tomorrow." That evening, Alex put the CD into his family's old stereo system. The recording quality was poor, clearly an amateur job done on old equipment. But as soon as the piano part began, he was captivated. The young Ms. Rivera played with technical precision and deep emotion. It wasn't perfect. He could hear a few hesitations, a couple of missed notes, but the overall effect was beautiful. As the recording ended, Alex realized something important. Even with its imperfections, the performance had moved him. Perhaps perfection wasn't the point. The next day, he handed the CD back to Ms. Rivera. "You played beautifully," he said. "Did you win the competition?" "No," she replied. "I came in 4th out of 22 pianists. But that's not why I showed you the recording." "Then why?" "Because I want you to understand that music isn't about perfection. It's about communication. Yes, you need technical skill, but more importantly, you need to have something to say." She leaned forward. "Alex, from the first day I heard you unconsciously tapping rhythms during your assessment, I knew you had something to say. You just didn't know it yet." As the recital drew closer, Alex's practice sessions intensified. He continued meeting with Mrs. Novak at the nursing home on weekends. Under her guidance, his technical skills improved steadily. Her arthritis-curved fingers demonstrated proper hand positions, and her sharp ears caught every nuance in his playing. "The middle section needs more dreaminess," she'd instruct. "Imagine you're floating on water. Let your wrists relax." Mr. Lee helped him break down the most challenging passages into mathematical patterns. "Think of it as solving an equation," he'd say. "Once you understand the formula, the solution becomes clear." And Mr. Vega, the janitor, kept the east stairwell available for Alex's acoustic practices. Sometimes he'd listen from the top of the stairs, nodding appreciatively when Alex captured the emotion of a particular phrase. One week before the recital, the school held a dress rehearsal. Students performed their pieces on the auditorium stage while teachers provided final critiques. Alex watched as his classmates played their instruments with confidence born of years of practice. When his turn came, he walked slowly to the grand piano at center stage. The auditorium felt enormous with its rows of empty seats stretching back into darkness. Soon those seats would be filled with parents, teachers, and students, all watching him. Alex sat at the piano, placed his hands on the keys, and began to play. For the first minute, everything went smoothly. The opening section flowed from his fingers just as he'd practiced. But as he transitioned to the middle part, his mind suddenly went blank. The colorful wall diagrams he relied on faded from his memory. His fingers froze. "Keep going," Ms. Rivera called from the front row. "Start from the beginning of that section." Alex took a deep breath and started again. This time he made it further before stumbling on a particularly difficult passage. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he tried once more, only to make a different mistake. After several attempts, Ms. Rivera stopped him. "That's enough for today, Alex. We'll work on those transitions tomorrow." As he gathered his sheet music, Alex felt a crushing weight of disappointment. After all these months of work, he still couldn't play the piece all the way through. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, the problematic passages playing over and over in his head. Around midnight, he got up and crept downstairs to the piano. With the house dark and silent around him, he placed his fingers on the keys but didn't press down. Instead, he closed his eyes and imagined playing. He visualized his colorful wall, the mathematical patterns Mr. Lee had shown him, the hand positions Mrs. Novak had demonstrated. He thought about what Ms. Rivera had said, that music wasn't about perfection but communication. What did he want to communicate with this piece? The question had never occurred to him before. He'd been so focused on playing the right notes that he hadn't thought about what they meant. Alex opened his eyes and began to play, softly so as not to wake his parents. This time he wasn't trying to get it right. He was trying to say something with the music, about struggle and persistence, about the journey from fear to something approaching confidence. When he finished, he realized he had played the entire piece from beginning to end for the first time. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was complete. And somehow that felt like enough. The day of the spring recital arrived with perfect weather, blue skies, gentle breezes, and flowering trees scenting the air with their blossoms. For most students, it was a beautiful backdrop to their moment in the spotlight. For Alex, it felt like nature itself was mocking his inner turmoil. "You need to eat something," his mother insisted at breakfast, pushing a plate of scrambled eggs toward him. "You can't perform on an empty stomach." Alex managed a few bites, but each mouthful seemed to stick in his throat. His father checked his watch and stood up from the table. "Time to go," he announced. "Don't want to be late for the big day." The drive to school was silent, Alex staring out the window at the familiar neighborhoods passing by. He'd played through the entire piece successfully only twice since that midnight session. Once during his final lesson with Ms. Rivera, and once during his last visit with Mrs. Novak. Both times had left him exhausted but hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, he could pull this off. The school parking lot was already filling up when they arrived. Parents carried bouquets of flowers and video cameras, ready to document their children's musical achievements. Alex's mother squeezed his hand as they walked toward the auditorium. "We're so proud of you," she said, "no matter what happens today." Inside, the backstage area was chaotic. Students in formal attire tuned instruments, practiced last-minute passages, and paced nervously. Ms. Rivera moved through the crowd, offering encouragement and making sure everyone was ready. When she reached Alex, she handed him a small envelope. "This is from Mrs. Novak. She wanted you to have it before you perform." Alex opened it to find a handwritten note. "Remember, dance with the piano, don't fight it. I'll be listening from the back row. Mrs. N." A lump formed in his throat. Mrs. Novak had mentioned wanting to attend, but he hadn't expected her to make the effort in her condition. Ms. Rivera checked her watch. 20 minutes until curtain. Do your warm-up exercises and try to stay calm. But staying calm was impossible. As Alex found a quiet corner to stretch his fingers and wrists as Mrs. Novak had taught him, he could hear snatches of conversation from nearby students. "Is Chen really going to play the whole Fantasia impromptu? This should be interesting. My older brother has a video ready to capture the train wreck." Alex closed his eyes, trying to block out the voices. He focused instead on the colorful patterns from his bedroom wall, mentally tracing the shapes that represented the music's emotional journey. A tap on his shoulder startled him. It was Mr. Lee. "Thought you might want this," the math teacher said, handing him a small card. On it was a sequence of numbers arranged in a pattern that Alex recognized instantly. The mathematical structure of the piece's most challenging section. "For luck," Mr. Lee added with a smile. "Though you won't need it. You've done the work." Before Alex could thank him, the lights flickered. The 5-minute warning. Students began lining up in performance order. As a pianist, Alex would be one of the last to perform, after the wind and string sections. He took his place in line, the card from Mr. Lee clutched in one hand and Mrs. Novak's note in the other. From behind the curtain, Alex could hear the audience settling into their seats. The principal's voice welcomed everyone to the annual spring recital, followed by polite applause. Then the curtain rose and the concert began. Alex watched as his classmates performed their pieces. The orchestra's opening number was followed by solo and small group performances. Some were flawless, others had minor mistakes, but all received enthusiastic applause. As his turn grew closer, Alex's anxiety peaked. His palms were sweating, his mouth dry. He tried to remember all the advice he'd received. Mrs. Novak's hand positions, Mr. Lee's patterns, Ms. Rivera's emphasis on communication over perfection. But his mind felt increasingly foggy. 3 performers before him. Then 2, then 1. Next, we have Alex Chen performing Frédéric Chopin's Fantasie Impromptu in C-sharp minor, Opus 66. the announcer's voice stated. Alex's legs felt like they were made of lead as he walked onto the stage. The grand piano waited at center stage, its lid raised to project the sound to the back of the auditorium. He approached it slowly, aware of hundreds of eyes watching his every move. The stage lights were bright, making it difficult to see the audience. But as Alex took his seat at the piano, he caught glimpses of familiar faces. His parents in the third row, Ms. Rivera standing at the side of the stage, and in the back, just as she'd promised, Mrs. Novak in her wheelchair, attended by a nursing home aide. Alex placed his hands on the keys. The auditorium fell completely silent, and then nothing. His fingers wouldn't move. His mind went completely blank. The opening notes of the piece, which he had played hundreds of times, were suddenly gone from his memory. Seconds ticked by, feeling like hours. Someone coughed. He heard a whisper from somewhere in the audience. Sweat trickled down his back. Alex closed his eyes, trying to center himself. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he suddenly saw not the notes or even his colorful wall patterns, but the faces of those who had believed in him. Ms. Rivera spotting potential where others saw only inadequacy. Mr. Lee finding mathematical beauty in the music. Mrs. Novak's gnarled hands demonstrating proper technique. Mr. Vega listening appreciatively in the stairwell. His parents moving an old piano into their living room for him. They had all seen something in him that he still couldn't fully see in himself. Taking a deep breath, Alex placed his fingers on the keys once more. Without opening his eyes, he began to play. The opening notes of the Fantaisie Impromptu filled the auditorium. Those rapid, cascading phrases that had once seemed impossible now flowing from his fingers. Alex kept his eyes closed, not playing from memory of the sheet music, but from the feeling of the piece that had become part of him over these months of struggle. As he transitioned into the middle section, that dreamy, lyrical passage that contrasted with the stormy opening, he finally opened his eyes. The audience came into focus, many leaning forward in their seats, expressions of surprise on their faces. Alex's fingers found each note, not perfectly, but with conviction. When he reached the section that had given him so much trouble during dress rehearsal, he didn't panic. Instead, he remembered Mr. Lee's card and visualized the pattern, letting it guide his hands. The music built toward its conclusion, returning to the intensity of the opening but transformed now, heading toward resolution. Alex felt something he had never experienced before in his playing. A sense of being fully connected to the music, as if he wasn't playing the piece but simply allowing it to flow through him. When the final notes faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. Alex sat motionless, hands still on the keys, hardly believing he had made it all the way through. Then came the applause. It started slowly, a few claps here and there, then built rapidly until the entire auditorium was filled with the sound. Alex stood up shakily and turned to face the audience. His vision blurred with tears as he saw people rising to their feet. His parents were standing, his mother wiping her eyes, his father beaming with pride. At the back, Mrs. Novak had somehow managed to stand from her wheelchair, supported by her aide, to join the ovation. As Alex took his bow, he caught sight of Ms. Rivera at the edge of the stage. She was applauding too, a look of quiet satisfaction on her face, not surprise, he realized, but confirmation. She had known all along what he was capable of. Walking off stage on unsteady legs, Alex was met by Mr. Lee. "I told you it was just a pattern," the math teacher said with a smile. "Once you see it, it all makes sense." Later, as students and parents mingled in the lobby after the recital, Alex found himself surrounded by classmates who had once doubted him. "That was amazing," said Lily, the cellist. "How long have you been playing?" Before Alex could answer, Zach, the violinist who had predicted his failure, approached. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking genuinely contrite. "I didn't think you could do it, but you proved me wrong. That was, well, it was really something." As the crowd began to disperse, Alex found himself standing with Ms. Rivera and his parents. "Thank you," he said simply to his teacher, "for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." Ms. Rivera nodded. "Music isn't about playing notes perfectly. It's about having something to say and the courage to say it. Today you found your voice, Alex." On the drive home, Alex sat quietly in the back seat, emotionally drained but filled with a new kind of confidence. He knew he wasn't suddenly a great pianist. The performance had flaws that a trained ear would have caught. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that he had faced something that seemed impossible and hadn't given up. His father caught his eye in the rearview mirror. "So will you be continuing with piano next year?" Alex smiled. "Definitely. But maybe something a little easier next time." His parents laughed, but Alex knew it wasn't entirely a joke. He had discovered something about himself during these past months. Not just an aptitude for music that had gone unnoticed, but a determination he hadn't known he possessed. That night, before going to bed, Alex took down all the colorful diagrams from his walls. He didn't need them anymore. The music had become part of him now, and whatever challenges came next, he would face them with the knowledge that sometimes the greatest limitations are the ones we place on ourselves.